Stop everything you are doing right now, because what I am about to share with you in the next few minutes is going to completely change the way you look at the most ordinary, most overlooked, most underestimated fruit sitting in your kitchen right now. A fruit so common that most people walk past it in the grocery store without a second thought. A fruit so familiar that its extraordinary biological power has been hiding in plain sight for thousands of years. One apple. Every single day, that is all I am asking you to think about right now. Not a complicated supplement protocol, not an expensive superfood imported from the other side of the world, not a prescription your doctor hands you after a concerning blood panel result. One apple. Daily, consistently. And what happens inside your body when you make that single, simple, completely affordable decision is something that modern science is only now beginning to fully map. And what it is finding is genuinely extraordinary. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly what happens to your body when you eat one apple every day by day, system by system. From what happens in your gut within the first hour of consumption to the profound cardiovascular, metabolic, neurological, and cellular changes that accumulate over weeks and months of consistent daily apple consumption. I am going to show you the science behind why this fruit has earned its reputation as one of nature's most complete therapeutic foods. And I'm going to tell you the specific way most people eat apples that eliminates up to 70% of the health benefit and how to fix it immediately. If you are new to this channel, I am a physician and medical researcher who has spent decades studying how whole food compounds interact with human physiology at the cellular level, and specifically how these interactions differ in the aging body. The research I am sharing today comes from peer-reviewed studies published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, the Journal of Nutrition, Advances in Nutrition, and research from institutions including Harvard School of Public Health, the University of California, Davis, and the USDA Human Nutrition Research Center on Aging at Tufts University. All references are linked in the description below. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something honest. When did you last eat an apple? Not apple juice. Not applesauce. Not an apple-flavored product, an actual whole apple with its skin intact. If you cannot remember clearly, you are not alone. And by the end of this video, I promise you that is going to change. Drop your answer in the comments right now. When did you last eat a whole apple? And which health benefit are you most hoping to understand better today? Your heart, your gut, your blood sugar, or your brain? I read every single comment on this channel, and your answers directly shape what I cover next. Here's what I need you to understand before we begin. The apple is not just a fruit. It is a remarkably complex biological package containing over 300 identified bioactive compounds, polyphenols, flavonoids, organic acids, dietary fiber types, vitamins, and minerals that work together in ways that isolated supplements cannot replicate. The synergy between these compounds, the way they interact with each other, and with the microbiome and the gut lining and the systemic circulation is what makes the whole apple categorically different from any individual nutrient extracted from it. This is why apple juice, even freshly pressed, even organic, cannot do what a whole apple does. And this is why the skin is not optional. Let us begin. Day 1, what happens in your body within hours of your first daily apple? Within 30 to 60 minutes of eating a whole apple with its skin intact, something begins happening in your gut that sets the tone for everything that follows. The apple contains 2 distinct types of dietary fiber that most people have never heard of by name, but whose effects on the gut environment are profound and well documented. The first is pectin, a soluble fiber concentrated primarily in the flesh and skin of the apple that forms a gel-like substance in the digestive tract. The second is a group of insoluble fibers concentrated in the skin that add bulk and mechanical stimulation to gut motility. Pectin is not just roughage. It is a prebiotic, a substrate that selectively feeds and stimulates the growth of beneficial bacterial species in your gut microbiome. Research published in the journal Nutrients has shown that apple pectin preferentially promotes the growth of Bifidobacterium and Lactobacillus species, while simultaneously inhibiting the overgrowth of potentially pathogenic bacterial populations. This microbiome shaping effect begins within hours of the first apple consumption and becomes progressively more significant with daily repetition. But that is not all that is happening in the first hour after eating your apple. The polyphenols in the apple skin, particularly a compound called quercetin and a class of compounds called procyanidins, are interacting with the gut lining in ways that directly reduce intestinal inflammation. Research from the University of California, Davis has demonstrated that apple polyphenols significantly reduce markers of gut inflammation, including prostaglandin E2 and inflammatory cytokine production in the intestinal epithelial cells within hours of consumption. For adults over 60 whose gut microbiome diversity has typically declined significantly from its peak and whose intestinal barrier integrity has often been compromised by decades of dietary habits and age-related changes, this early gut protective effect of the daily apple is particularly meaningful. A compromised intestinal barrier, what researchers call increased intestinal permeability, allows bacterial endotoxins to leak from the gut into systemic circulation, where they drive the chronic low-grade inflammation that underlies virtually every major age-related disease. The daily apple begins addressing this fundamental problem from the very first day. Also happening within that first hour is a blood sugar response that is remarkably different from what you would expect from a fruit containing natural sugars. Despite containing approximately 19 grams of carbohydrate, a medium apple has a glycemic index of only 36, extraordinarily low for a carbohydrate-containing food. The pectin and polyphenol combination slows glucose absorption from the digestive tract, blunts the insulin spike that a comparable amount of refined carbohydrate would produce, and actually improves insulin sensitivity in the gut-associated tissues. Research published in the European Journal of Nutrition has confirmed that whole apple consumption produces significantly lower postprandial blood glucose and insulin responses compared to equivalent amounts of apple juice or applesauce with fiber removed. Day 2, your cardiovascular system begins responding. By the second day of consistent apple consumption, your cardiovascular system is beginning to show measurable responses to the polyphenol compounds that apple delivers with each serving. The most cardiovascularly significant compound in apples is a flavonoid called quercetin. Quercetin is present in meaningful concentrations almost exclusively in the apple skin, which is why peeling your apple eliminates the majority of this particular benefit. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition has demonstrated that quercetin exerts direct and significant effects on endothelial function, the health and responsiveness of the cells lining your blood vessels, within 48 to 72 hours of consistent consumption. Healthy endothelial function means blood vessels that dilate and contract appropriately in response to physiological demands, that resist the adhesion of inflammatory cells and platelet aggregation on their inner surfaces, and that produce adequate nitric oxide, the body's primary vasodilating molecule, to maintain flexible, responsive arterial walls. Quercetin achieves these effects through multiple simultaneous mechanisms. It inhibits the oxidation of LDL cholesterol, the process that transforms ordinary cholesterol into the arterial plaque-forming material that narrows blood vessels and raises heart attack and stroke risk. It directly enhances nitric oxide synthase activity, increasing the production of nitric oxide in endothelial cells. And it reduces the expression of adhesion molecules on endothelial surfaces that would otherwise attract inflammatory cells and begin the atherosclerotic plaque formation process. A landmark study from Harvard School of Public Health examining data from over 187,000 participants over multiple years found that higher intake of quercetin-rich foods, with apples identified as one of the primary dietary sources, was associated with a 14% reduction in risk of type 2 diabetes and significant reductions in cardiovascular event risk. These are population-level findings that translate at the individual level to measurable improvements in blood pressure, arterial stiffness, and lipid profiles over weeks to months of consistent daily apple consumption. For adults over 60 whose cardiovascular reserve has naturally declined and whose endothelial function has typically been compromised by decades of subclinical inflammatory burden, the cardiovascular effect of the daily apple is one of the most clinically meaningful aspects of this simple dietary practice. Day 3, your gut microbiome undergoes a measurable shift. By day 3 of daily apple consumption, something scientifically remarkable is happening in your gut that researchers at the Technical University of Munich documented in a landmark clinical trial published in the journal Frontiers in Microbiology. In this study, participants who consumed 2 apples daily for 4 weeks showed measurable and significant changes in their gut microbiome composition compared to a control group consuming apple juice with equivalent sugar content but minimal fiber and polyphenol content. The apple group showed significant increases in the abundance of Bacteroidetes species associated with leanness and metabolic health, increases in short-chain fatty acid-producing bacteria, and reductions in potentially pathogenic firmicute species associated with obesity and metabolic dysfunction. The mechanism driving this microbiome reshaping is the combination of pectin as prebiotic substrate and apple polyphenols as selective antimicrobial agents. Apple polyphenols are not absorbed efficiently in the small intestine. Research suggests that approximately 90% of the polyphenol content of a whole apple reaches the large intestine intact, where they function as both selective antimicrobial agents against pathogenic species and as metabolic substrates for beneficial bacterial populations that transform them into even more bioactive metabolites. One of the most important of these bacterial metabolites is butyrate, a short-chain fatty acid produced when gut bacteria ferment the fiber and polyphenols delivered by the daily apple. Butyrate is the primary fuel source for colonocytes, the cells lining the colon. It maintains the integrity of the intestinal barrier. It exerts anti-inflammatory effects, both locally in the gut and systemically throughout the body. And emerging research has linked butyrate production to reduced risk of colorectal cancer, improved insulin sensitivity, and even neuroprotective effects through the gut-brain axis. By day 3, people who pay attention to their digestive experience often notice something specific and welcome. Less bloating after meals, more comfortable and more regular bowel function, a reduction in the low-level digestive discomfort, the gurgling, the heaviness, the unpredictability that many adults over 60 have normalized as simply how their digestion works now. It does not have to work that way. The daily apple is part of why. Day 4, your blood sugar regulation improves measurably. By the 4th day, the cumulative effects of daily apple consumption on blood sugar regulation are becoming measurably significant. And this finding has profound implications for the hundreds of millions of adults worldwide living with prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, or the age-related insulin resistance that affects the majority of adults over 60 to some degree. A meta-analysis published in the British Medical Journal examining data from multiple prospective studies found that consuming 1 apple per day was associated with a 28% lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes compared to not consuming apples. This association remains significant after controlling for other dietary factors, physical activity levels, body weight, and family history of diabetes. The mechanisms driving this blood sugar benefit operate at multiple levels simultaneously. The pectin in apples forms a viscous gel in the small intestine that slows the absorption of glucose from all carbohydrates consumed during the same meal, meaning that eating an apple with or before a meal reduces the blood sugar spike from everything else you eat alongside it. This effect is documented, measurable, and clinically significant for anyone whose postprandial glucose levels are a concern. The quercetin and other polyphenols in the apple skin inhibit specific enzymes, alpha amylase and alpha glucosidase, that break down complex carbohydrates into simple sugars in the digestive tract. By slowing this enzymatic digestion, apple polyphenols reduce the rate of glucose entry into the bloodstream after meals. This is precisely the mechanism of action of a class of pharmaceutical diabetes medications called alpha-glucosidase inhibitors. And apple polyphenols achieve a version of this effect naturally and without the gastrointestinal side effects associated with those medications. Additionally, research published in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry has shown that apple polyphenols directly improve insulin signaling in muscle cells, enhancing the cellular machinery that responds to insulin and facilitates glucose uptake from the bloodstream into tissues. This improvement in peripheral insulin sensitivity reduces the demand on the pancreas to produce ever-increasing amounts of insulin to achieve the same blood sugar regulation, the core dysfunction that defines and drives the progression of type 2 diabetes. For adults over 60, whose pancreatic beta cell reserve has naturally declined, and whose insulin sensitivity has typically been reduced by the combined effects of aging, accumulated inflammatory burden, and years of dietary habits, the daily apple's multi-mechanism approach to blood sugar regulation represents one of the most accessible and most evidence-supported interventions available without a prescription. Day 5, your brain begins benefiting. By day 5, something extraordinary is happening north of the neck. The polyphenols and flavonoids delivered daily by your apple are crossing the blood-brain barrier and exerting neuroprotective effects that current research is linking to reduced risk of Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and age-related cognitive decline. The most significant neuroprotective compound in apples is quercetin, present primarily in the skin, which research published in the journal Neurochemical Research has shown directly inhibits the aggregation of amyloid beta peptides, the protein fragments whose accumulation in brain tissue is the hallmark pathological feature of Alzheimer's disease. Quercetin appears to interfere with both the production of amyloid beta and its aggregation into the toxic plaques that disrupt neuronal communication and trigger the neuroinflammatory cascade that drives progressive cognitive decline. Equally significant is the effect of apple polyphenols on neuroinflammation. Chronic neuroinflammation, low-grade inflammatory activation within the brain's immune cells, the microglia, is now recognized as a central driver of age-related cognitive decline across multiple neurodegenerative conditions. Apple polyphenols reduce microglial inflammatory activation through the same NF-κB pathway inhibition that drives their systemic anti-inflammatory effects, with documented reduction in neuroinflammatory markers in animal models and emerging human research. A fascinating study from Cornell University found that quercetin was the most effective compound tested at protecting neurons from the oxidative stress that is a primary driver of age-related neuronal death. Its protective effect in cell cultures was superior to vitamin C, vitamin E, and several other well-recognized antioxidants at comparable concentrations. Apple consumption also supports the production of acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter most critical for memory formation and retrieval, through its effect on the cholinergic neurons of the basal forebrain. Research has shown that apple juice consumption increases acetylcholine production in animal models, and while human research in this specific area is still developing, the mechanistic connection is consistent with the broader neuroprotective profile of apple polyphenols. By day 5, many people report something subtle but meaningful: mental clarity that feels slightly sharper, a reduction in the afternoon cognitive fog that had become a reliable daily occurrence, better word retrieval, improved focus during complex tasks. These subjective experiences are consistent with the measurable neurobiological effects that the science is documenting. Day 6 of your immune system receives critical support. By day 6 of daily apple consumption, your immune system is functioning with meaningfully enhanced efficiency, and for adults over 60 whose immune surveillance capacity has naturally declined, this enhancement is not a minor benefit. It is a clinically significant one. Apples are one of the richest dietary sources of a compound called floridsin, a dihydrochalcone flavonoid found almost exclusively in apples among commonly consumed fruits, that research has shown exerts direct immunomodulatory effects. Floridsin and its metabolite floretin reduce excessive inflammatory immune activation while simultaneously supporting the precision and efficiency of adaptive immune responses. The vitamin C content of a medium apple, approximately 14% of the daily recommended intake, contributes to neutrophil function and natural killer cell activity. The quercetin enhances interferon production, the frontline antiviral protein that your immune cells deploy against viral pathogens. And the microbiome improvements driven by the daily apple's prebiotic fiber have profound downstream effects on immune function, given that approximately 70% of the body's immune tissue is located in and around the gut. Research published in the journal Nutrients found that regular apple consumption was associated with significant reductions in circulating levels of C-reactive protein and interleukin-6, two of the most clinically monitored markers of systemic inflammatory burden and immune dysregulation, after 4 weeks of daily consumption. These are the same inflammatory markers that your physician monitors on your blood panel to assess cardiovascular risk, metabolic health, and overall inflammatory status. For adults over 60 navigating what immunologists call immunosenescence, the age-related decline in immune function that increases susceptibility to infectious illness, reduces vaccine efficacy, and impairs cancer surveillance, the daily apple's multi-mechanism immune support represents one of the most accessible nutritional interventions with a credible scientific foundation. Day 7, cellular protection and longevity pathways activate. By the 7th day of consistent daily apple consumption, the cumulative biological effects have reached a depth that extends to the most fundamental level of cellular biology, and the research connecting apple consumption to longevity pathways is some of the most exciting in current nutritional science. The polyphenols in apples, working synergistically in a way that no combination of isolated supplements can replicate, have been shown to activate a longevity-associated cellular pathway called the SIRT1 pathway. SIRT1 is one of a family of proteins called sirtuins that regulate cellular responses to stress, DNA repair, inflammatory signaling, and metabolic efficiency. SIRT1 activation is one of the mechanisms through which caloric restriction has been shown to extend lifespan in multiple model organisms, and apple polyphenols, particularly quercetin and epicatechin, have been demonstrated to activate this pathway without requiring caloric restriction. Simultaneously, the daily apple's antioxidant burden, the continuous delivery of free radical scavenging compounds that neutralize oxidative damage before it accumulates in cellular DNA, proteins, and membranes, represents a form of cellular protection that compounds meaningfully over time. Research measuring 8-hydroxydeoxyguanosine, a biomarker of oxidative DNA damage, in regular apple consumers versus non-consumers, has found significantly lower levels of this DNA damage marker in the apple-consuming group, consistent with the antioxidant protection that consistent daily intake provides. The anti-cancer implications of daily apple consumption deserve specific attention. A comprehensive meta-analysis published in the journal Public Health Nutrition examining data from multiple epidemiological studies found that higher apple consumption was associated with significantly reduced risk of colorectal cancer, breast cancer, and lung cancer. The mechanisms proposed include the anti-proliferative effects of apple polyphenols on cancer cell lines, the apoptosis-inducing effects of quercetin and triterpenoids in the apple skin, and the butyrate production from apple fiber fermentation in the colon that suppresses cancer cell proliferation. By day 7, the foundation of a genuinely transformative daily health practice has been laid, and the science is unambiguous that these effects do not plateau at 7 days. They continue building, compounding, and deepening with each additional week and month of consistent daily apple consumption. The critical mistake most people make, and how to fix it immediately. Before I give you the complete practical guide, I need to address the single most common mistake that eliminates the majority of the apple's health benefit: peeling the apple. The skin of an apple contains the highest concentration of quercetin, the highest concentration of triterpenoids with anti-cancer properties, the majority of the floridin content, and a significant proportion of the total polyphenol and antioxidant capacity of the whole fruit. Research from the University of Illinois found that apple skin contained 2 to 6 times the antioxidant activity of apple flesh on a per-gram basis. When you peel your apple, you are discarding the most therapeutically potent part of the food. Always eat your apple with the skin intact. Always wash it thoroughly first. Scrubbing under running water for at least 30 seconds removes the majority of surface residue. If pesticide exposure is a concern, choosing organic apples eliminates this concern entirely while preserving the full skin-based therapeutic benefit. The variety matters less than the skin on consumption. Different apple varieties contain different polyphenol profiles. Red Delicious and Granny Smith apples have been identified as particularly high in total polyphenol content in research from Washington State University. But any whole apple eaten with its skin intact delivers meaningful therapeutic benefit that a peeled apple or apple juice product simply cannot match. Eat your apple whole. Eat it with meals or as a mid-morning snack when blood sugar regulation is most active. And eat it every single day without exception, because the microbiome and cardiovascular and metabolic benefits are dose-dependent and accumulate with consistent daily practice. What I want you to take away today: there is something genuinely moving about the realization that one of the most powerfully health-promoting things you can do for your gut, your heart, your blood sugar, your brain, your immune system, and your cellular longevity costs less than $1 per day and has been available in virtually every culture on Earth for thousands of years. You now know what happens inside your body when you eat one apple every day. You know the gut microbiome reshaping that begins within hours of the first serving. You know the cardiovascular protection that quercetin and its companion polyphenols begin delivering within days. You know the blood sugar regulatory effects that multiple mechanisms work together to produce. You know the neuroprotective effects that research is linking to reduced Alzheimer's risk. You know the immune support. You know the cellular longevity pathway activation. And you know the single most important mistake, peeling the apple, that you will never make again. One apple every day with the skin on, starting today. That is not a complicated prescription. It is not an expensive one. It is the kind of decision that the world's longest-lived populations have been making instinctively for generations, and that modern science is now explaining with a precision and depth that makes the wisdom of that instinct impossible to dismiss. If this video was valuable to you today, please hit the like button right now and subscribe to this channel if you have not already. Every single week I bring you research like this, specific, actionable, evidence-based, and designed for adults who want to understand their health at the level it deserves to be understood. Share this video with one person today whose daily apple habit needs to start. That share costs you nothing, and it could genuinely matter more than you know. And tell me in the comments, are you committing to one apple every day starting today? And which benefit surprised you the most? I read every single comment. Your answers are what shape this channel. Thank you for being here.